My name is Alicia Casey, and I am an activist that does work with Rocky Flats. I also am part of the groups Candelas Glows and Rocky Flats Glows, and hopefully you are all here because you got my email, and if not, I invite you to sign our email list at the back of the room so that you can get those monthly updates that I send out. Before I get started, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge all of you for being here this evening. I know that you have busy lives and many things that you could be doing with your time. And for you to be here to learn about these important issues impacting our community really takes something. So thank you. And thank you for giving your time graciously this evening to be with us. I believe we're going to go till about 8:30. We'll have a question and answer session after our panel of scientists and community members speak. But before I introduce them and let them speak, I just wanted to say a few things about our role here. The campaign to discredit, misdirect, and basically call out people who are speaking the truth as fearmongers is in full effect. And it is impacting those around us not wanting to stand up and speak for the truth. And I want you to know that there is a community that needs you to stand up and not be afraid to speak the truth. Because if you fall into believing that rhetoric, they win. And it's not. These are issues that are going to continue to impact us for the next 24,000 years. The plutonium that is at Rocky Flats, its half-life is 24,000 years. So it's not going away, and it's so important that we continue to stand powerfully and stand up for ourselves and our health and our communities and really make sure that we are staying informed. So the fact that you're here to listen to scientists that are not sharing opinions, as they were called at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife meeting, they're sharing facts that they know. And I am so honored and privileged to be asked to introduce them because their stand and their commitment to these issues over the last decades is incredible. And what they have at stake is a lot with their professional reputations, and that they continue year after year to show up and hold the government officials accountable for what is happening at the Rocky Flat site is absolutely something that should be commended. So thank you all very much. So please, everyone, if you ever have questions, Bonnie and Marion, who are the awesome organizers that put these monthly Right to Know meetings together, they are here. I am here also as well. We love to engage with you guys, and we love to help you get involved with anything that you might want to do or take on. We have lots of different campaigns that we'd love to get people involved with as well. But it's so important that we continue to keep our voices heard, because the minute we're quiet, that takes away someone's choice to know the issues and choose powerfully for themselves whether or not they want to recreate or whether or not they want to open that land. And by staying quiet, we don't allow them that choice because they don't know what's actually happening out there. So please stay active in your communities. Please continue to let people know what's actually going on out there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harvey. Dr. Harvey Nichols is one of the scientists with the Rocky Flats Technical Group, and he's going to moderate the session. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, hello. My name is Harvey Nichols. I'm a retired professor of biology, so you can ask me a question beginning with doctor or professor, or you can just say, hey, Harvey, as I encourage my students to do. This is going to be a fairly informal event. In fact, later we'd like to walk around amongst you and take questions from you. So if you, apart from the occasional question for just immediate detailed clarification, if you could hold your questions till the end, and then we'll have plenty of time for that. So welcome, and of course one of the main reasons behind our panel is the fact that we've been frozen out of some of the official meetings by being told we were not allowed to speak. We could provide a question on a piece of paper that may or may not be allowed by the organisers of the meeting, but with the presence of an armed security officer right there, ready to escort you out if you spoke, this is a chilling effect. In fact, I've seen that operating now for the best part of 20 years with the Fish and Wildlife Service. They have it down to a fine art. So the panel here is members of a group called the Rocky Flats Technical Group, and they're roughly 1/3 of the size of the major group. We've got about 20 people that are a full range of environmental scientists and also physicians, lawyers, people that are very able on the regulatory aspect of the refuse that we're going to talk about. So we've got a very wide range of environmental knowledge here, and in addition we've got the real-world workshop experience of Mr. Ziegler, who can tell us something about the realities of contamination on the shop floor. And between us, just in this small group here, we have over 200 years of direct experience of Rocky Flats. Fieldwork experience, lab experience, workshop experience, forensic detective work, regulatory work, and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of expertise. So why are we here? Why are we opposing the federal authorities? It sounds a bit noble, but basically it's civic duty. I know these people very well from many, many years of working with them. I know they're straightforward and straight-arrowed people. But I remember when I gave up my British passport back in the 1970s, I was told directly when I accepted or was awarded citizenship that I had a compelling duty to correct the errors of government. And boy, are there a lot of errors out of Rocky Flats. It's almost enjoyable to. Anyway, shouldn't get too into doing that. So it's very natural for people that don't know the story of Rocky Flats over the decades to think, well, we naturally trust the federal authorities, don't we? And somebody in a uniform says, look, we are the US government, and these are the facts. And the people out there, as Alyssa's already referred to, are just fearmongers. Gosh, that puts us in a peculiar light. But in fact, nowadays we have to look after our own welfare and use a lot of critical thinking and listen to as many experts as we can. Again, if it doesn't sound too noble, we are volunteers, we're not paid. And when a federal staff person says we're fearmongers, the word monger actually means salesman. It's an ancient word, comes from the Latin. It means somebody is selling something. We are not selling anything, we're not paid. The guys on the other side happen to be paid to apparently promote, etc. So we have to think about the quality of the people that are making these statements and their authority that should come undisturbed, unalloyed by events. But in fact, they argue their case, they promote their case. Now this is getting into opinion, and I'm going to be a little bit opinionated for the next couple of minutes before we transition into the harder science details of the rest of the panel. I've got lots of detail myself. In fact, I've got a whole lump of handouts here, which I'm not going to give you now because you'd start reading it and then I'd lose your attention. So I'll put them up back later, okay? So in terms of my own direct experience, back in 1974, I was asked by the DOE to do a study of airborne particles out at the flats. I'll keep it very, very brief. My colleagues have heard all this before, and they could give the same story that I'm giving. But basically, very briefly, I found by a unique method of measurement involving snowfall, no details, that there was hot particulate matter, radionuclides, all over the site, all over the refuge. And it took me years to discover where those particles came from, because I kept on getting half-truths and deception from the guys that worked at the plant. I finally worked it out with the chance at the state capitol to ask a direct question in the 1980s: are you emitting on a routine daily basis tiny quantities of very small particles of plutonium? And the answer was yes. Okay. Now, the EPA says that's the most dangerous exposure for the general public, because the stuff can get right into your lungs and eventually start tumour formation if you're really unfortunate. So the stuff is all over the site, there's no doubt about that. And again, from transitioning from federal authorities saying the site is totally pristine to now admitting that yes, there's plutonium out there at very low levels. But we all know, and we'll illustrate on this panel, that very low levels can still harm you. And finally, within the last 12 months or so, the Fish and Wildlife Manager out at the site, David Lucas, has said, well, look, we will admit that on average there is only technical detail coming up 1 picocurie per gram of soil out at the site, and that's perfectly safe. It's within the standards for radiation exposure. So I went back to my backyard, chose some soil samples at the right depth that they use, 6 millimeters depth, weighed them, oven dried them and weighed them, and realized that and I'm jumping ahead now, that what he'd just given me was the ability to say to David Lucas at the next meeting, from your own data, which are probably minimized, you've got over 20 million potentially fatal doses of plutonium in the refuge from your own data. And his jaw was down there. He couldn't answer. So we need to be very, very critical with these people, use the best science we can. They're very defensive about their own science. It's all in-house. But even if you use the in-house science, there's a lot of evidence, as I'll come to right at the end, to show that we can, in fact, solve this problem. I'm probably running over time here. I'm supposed to be timing myself. But let me very, very briefly just give you an example of the EPA. You'd expect the EPA and the State Health Department to take care of us. And beyond that, we've always got Congress that will always take care of us, right? Okay? So the EPA, just one example. I've got many examples that were written up for a state commission, which is on here somewhere. EPA senior scientist out at the site, Tim Rader, said to me in the year 2000, phoned up out of the blue and said, I want to address your class. You've been telling me it's dangerous to burn the prairie out of Rocky Flats. I want to correct them. You've been misinforming them. So he came to the class, 2 sections, seniors in biology, and they took him apart. They've done their homework, they've done a term paper on the problems of Rocky Flats, and at the end of the first meeting, if I just put the mic down for a moment, he was clutching himself defensively like this. They had him cold. They took him apart. In the afternoon, he brought in a PR person and a physicist to back him up, and still, my students just did a real job on him. And so that's an example of how little he is hand in glove, I would say, almost in bed with the DOE. Then what do we think about the State Health Department? Well, they're extremely defensive too, and they've drunk the Kool-Aid that the DOE hands out. We've met with them repeatedly, the topmost people in their organisation, and they just take everything that the DOE feeds to them. And so there's no protection there whatsoever. So you have to look out for yourselves. Finally, David Lucas, the manager for Fish and Wildlife at the refuge, is quoted in an article last year in Earth Island News, sergeant, saying that he goes around the site with a Geiger counter and everything's hunky-dory, no problem, everything is safe, there's no trace of excessive radiation. So we asked another member of our group, who's a professor of chemistry specialising in plutonium in the environment, Dr. Ketterer, and he said, that's nonsense. He said, possibly fraudulent. You cannot use a Geiger counter in the field to detect plutonium at these low levels. And then we've got Larry Hankin, who's a retired radiation specialist, a technician from Rocky Flats, who said the same thing. And there's literature on that too. So these are people you expect to tell the truth and to be excessively careful about promoting the site, because we are talking about health risks, but you can't trust them. So finally, the way to solve this is to demand of our politicians, our representatives, as I did last year with no answer whatsoever, letters to Senator Bennett, Congressman Hollis and Perlmutter, bring in the National Academy of Sciences as an independent judge of what we're saying, and the amount of material has already been done under contract for the DOE. This is a document, you can see how weighty it is. There are over 1,500 soil analyses for plutonium in here, and there's ample evidence to show the site is not safe. So if the National Academy said, hey, hang on, keep this closed for quite a while, then the politicians would be able to maneuver the federal people and say, let's close the site for the moment. So I'm going to pass on now to Gale Biggs. Dr. Gale Biggs is a micrometeorologist. He's just written a splendid article in the Daily Camera about the science that shows that the site is not safe. And I apologize for the amount of time I've taken. Okay.
Hi, I'm Dr. Biggs. Everyone should have a copy of my speech for tonight. If you don't, if you'd hold up your hands, it will be Cyril. Some copies over here. About 2.5 decades ago, the Colorado Department of Health conducted a survey, a study, as to what were the most dangerous emissions from Rocky Flats. And they came up with this, that it was the airborne emissions that were the most dangerous. And of these, plutonium-239 topped the list as the most dangerous airborne emission. But neither the Health Department nor EPA have any airborne standards, nor have they set any, nor developed any monitoring techniques for detecting plutonium on Rocky Flats. The standard airborne monitoring device by EPA is the high-volume sampler, which is referred to as the high-vol. And this high-vol does not really sample plutonium in the range of its samplings. It can't measure plutonium. And I have included in my handout a copy that shows in the middle. You can see the sampling range of the high-vol sampler, which goes from 0.01 microns out to about 30 microns. But the plutonium coming out of the stacks is over here at 0.01 microns smaller. And over here, this is the plutonium that's settled underground and gathers with the dust. And when the wind blows, it blows out. And those particles are in the range of about 25 to several hundred microns. And here's the range of the high-vol sampler. It totally misses. It cannot pick up. And of course, they always say that, well, we've measured out there and there's nothing out there. Well, of course, they didn't measure anything. So plutonium-239, when you breathe it in, it stows to the different concentrations in the body, and it hits the lung, the liver, the brain, the bones, and the reproducting system mostly. And once it settles in, it stays exactly where it is and just starts emitting alpha particles And as was pointed out, with a 24,110-year half-life, it's there with you for the rest of your life. And usually within a couple of decades, it will cause cancer or other ailments. The health departments and DOE state that the emissions from Rocky Flats are meeting their standards. Therefore, it has to be healthy and safe. Well, the problem is they have no standards for plutonium-239. They've never established any. And so, it's just not safe out there. Then in 1995, DOE estimated that the Rocky Flats cleanup would take about 65 years and $37 billion to complete. They said, oh, that's too much, so they reduced it down to 10 years and $7 billion without explaining how they were going to do it. Well, what they did was they simply imploded their buildings, still filled with plutonium-239, and then covered it over with dirt and said it's clean, don't worry about it. What the problem is that plutonium will migrate both vertically in the soil and horizontally, and it comes back up to the surface. And so it's still, even if there's, where they put clean dirt, it's all covered up over again like that. And then in 1989, Governor Romer established a scientific panel, and I got to be chairman of the Air Committee on that one. And we just found that plutonium was widely spread over Rocky Flats. The workers were very candid when we talked to them and asked them questions. If we went to the director's level or above, peaches and cream, no problem. But worker level, it was straightforward. And due to the poor management, the waste containers were seldom ever dumped. And so the workers, in order to meet their production schedules, had to get rid of this waste plutonium, and so they went out onto the Rocky Flats soil plant and dumped it out onto the ground, and if it was a lot, they'd dig a little hole, maybe a foot or two deep, and just dump it in there and cover it back up. And this was how they did it, and they estimated that from 60 to 99% of the plutonium coming off from Rocky Flats was coming from the ground. And Governor Romer had asked us to be sure and tell him the true facts about how Rocky Flats was, good or bad. And we did, very candidly and straightforwardly. And our report was never published. And we've heard several rumors. One of them was that they just ran out of money. But the one I believe the most is that DOE found out about our report and killed it. So, also, just to give you an idea of how bad it was, I have included a copy of a report done by a Rocky Flats employee on the inspection of the exhaust flap from Building 771. And it says in here that under the physical conditions, which is down this side, that the physical condition is poor, and the technology status of it is inadequate. And so, and then the comments on the right side, you really should read those. I'll just read one sentence at the bottom of the top comment section. It says, for 31 years, the main exhaust flue has been a sewage dump station for plutonium. In other words, that's where they dump their waste, put it into the film, and then just blew it out the stack. And so, is that my 7 minutes?
Yeah, that's all right. Finish.
Okay, I'll go very quickly.
Okay, good.
I just want to say that I am concerned Rocky Flats is located on an alluvial plain at the mouth of Coal Creek Canyon. Radioactive waste, of course, is buried there. A large flood down Coal Creek Canyon, such as the Big Thompson flood of a few years ago, could wash Rocky Flats off the plateau and carry all of its waste into the neighborhoods off to the east. And that scares me. Finally, I just want to say that there was mention of a letter that I had presented, and it got printed in the Daily Camera, And this was in response to the fear-mongering comments. And basically I said that no, what we're doing is based on scientific facts. And so I wrote this letter pointing out what scientific facts we were using. And at the last line in it, in 1994, ABC, which was a Nightline show, put on a half-hour show on the most dangerous building in America. The one they selected was building 771 out of Rocky Flats. So, okay.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you. So next speaker is...
Hi, my name is John Lipsky, and thank you, Harvey, for the timer. It's working really well.
Okay. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for attending tonight, especially Bonnie and Marion. Appreciate it. And Alicia, Harvey, moderating in our panel tonight. In May of 2000, I first learned that the government intended to make part of Rocky Flats, or all of it, a national wildlife refuge. And my response to that was to contribute to the Ambush Grand Jury, nonprofit, nonfiction book, and I have copies if you're interested. Initially, I'd like to say, please join me in keeping the sordid details of the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant and National Wildlife Refuge alive. Nuclear waste is not our friend. What would make anyone state that plutonium did not contaminate the refuge? In April 2015, a DOE official presented to local officials that the refuge is essentially uncontaminated former buffer area. That the former buffer area is essentially uncontaminated is a lie. An untruth meant to deceive. And Fenerty, who's seated 2 people over from me, and I were provided the opportunity to rebut the DOE official at the same political body. Didn't help much, I don't think. The refuge and the Rocky Flats adjacent properties comprising the $375 million settlement from last year were contaminated, necessitating remediation. A federal jury in 2006 determined that plutonium would persist indefinitely on the Rocky Flats adjacent properties. Rocky Flats was not cleaned up. It was a cover-up. DOE controls the variegated science at Rocky Flats. The U.S. government has colorfully determined that the refuge is safe for all uses. The buffer zone technical review documented 114 concerns or interests by the CDPHE and DOE from 1999 to 2003. The buffer zone in future refuge was reduced in acreage but not remediated. The review did not address 43 of the 114, or 38% of the CDPHE concerns or interests. Are 38% of neglected concerns and interests a statistical success? Apparently to the government. Not to mention that an active radioactive Superfund site with reportable conditions lies in the middle of the Rocky Flats refuge. So when they open the refuge, you'll have a Superfund site to bring around and posy with. The U.S. government neglected established procedures, key documents, and scientific protocols in its determination that the Rocky Flats refuge is safe. Waste burial sites, known but not remediated, because the Dow official said our records are vague, from the 1970s, waste stream reports from 1987, EPA environmental sampling from the June 1989 raid at Rocky Flats were not analyzed. The 65 boxes of Rocky Flats Special Federal Grand Jury evidence from 1989 to 1992 have not been made available to the public. Now, CDPHE, DOE, and EPA were offered the opportunity to look at the boxes, but they declined. You have to ask yourself, why do they not want to make that available? The 1992 crimes committed at Rocky Flats were not reviewed. Evidence from the Rocky Flats adjacent property suit from 2005 and 2006 are available for public review. The Gamma surveys that established that the Rocky Flats refuge is safe, instead of alpha surveys, which is what plutonium is, an alpha emitter, during the accelerated cleanup are brought into question. Serious question. And that's just to mention a few references. Lastly, yes, I ignore CDPHE, DOE, and EPA so-called science that the Rocky Flats refuge is safe. When those government agencies evaluate all the available Rocky Flats evidence, the historical burial sites, the criminal court documents, and purged Rocky Flats reading room documents with independent verification in an open public access forum will be the occasion to discuss safety at the Rocky Flats refuge. Finally, the government should remove the legal constraints imposed on me and members of the Rocky Flats Special Federal Grand Jury 89-2. They also have legal constraints for the rest of their life concerning the crimes of the former Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant. Finally, Rocky Flats is not safe. It was a crime. And I thank you. And I'll have some copies in the back, and you can certainly email me, and I'll be glad to share the document because I'm evidence-based, so I have a lot of references for everything I said tonight. Thank you.
John jumped into his commentary so nicely and so quickly. I didn't get a chance to introduce him, but here's the reason why I mentioned forensic detective work. He will correct me if I get the details slightly misquoted, but John was in charge of the 1989 June 6th raid by the FBI and the EPA, primarily the FBI, involving approximately 100 agents that basically, to put it crudely, opened up the can of worms. And he was the, correct me again, lead detective, forensic detective agent for the FBI for the Rocky Mountain West, right? Near enough. And as he was hinting, he's been forbidden because of his deep, deep knowledge. And this applies also to the foreman of the grand jury that sat for 2 years and Representative Wes McKinley ran for office successfully in order to try to open up this process also. The two of them, John and Wes McKinley, have been forbidden, as I understand it, on pain of jail from telling what they know, even if they would talk to a Q clearance congressman. So again, that hints at something rather sinister. So, okay. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Gale. So, Anne, are you okay? Okay. This is Anne Fenerty. It's a chemist, an inorganic chemist, originally from Hungary. Foreigner also on the panel. So, away you go, Anne.
Hi, thank you. My background is I have a master's in chemistry, college teaching, and I was active in the Boulder League of Women Voters, chaired their environmental laws committee when they came in, so that's how I became involved in Rocky Flats, and I was a member of the Citizens Advisory Board to Rocky Flats. I'm glad that you were all told about the reasons for this meeting, and I think it's very important to point out that the sharing sessions that Fish and Wildlife organized about the refuge, and for which they paid $76,000 for a PR committee, were totally closed to the public. In other words, the public was, as somebody mentioned, I think Harvey mentioned, public was allowed to come, but not to ask any questions, not to make any comments. Anything you wanted to say had to be put in an envelope, and later on maybe they were going to let you know about it. It was totally unaccepted, and I'm very glad that this Scientists Speak has been organized, because we really don't have any special interest in that, but we feel because of our background, we need to speak about the dangers of the site, and I would like to speak about that for a minute. As to plutonium, and it was mentioned here, 1 microgram of plutonium, which you couldn't see, such a small particle, is potentially lethal when inhaled. That was in my Advanced Inorganic Chemistry handbook about 40 years ago. So it has been an accepted knowledge, and the plant has been at one of the judicial meetings about this. It was announced by DOE that 2,600 pounds of plutonium is MUF, missing, unaccounted for. That's their expression for it. That's just a very, very horrifying comment if you think about the fact that this place is going to be opened for children to recreate on. And we all are opposed to the opening of the Rocky Flats Wildlife Refuge. So I would like to say that some of our situation is a little bit similar to Flint, Michigan, where I lived for 10 years, where a scientist, a doctor actually explained that kids are getting sick from the lead contamination in the water, and no one listened to her until a scientist from Virginia Tech came in and spoke about it. Now, the EPA head has been fired, and the state health department director is potentially going to jail. So Rocky Flats simply is a 10 square mile site, and as it has been mentioned, in the middle of it is a 1,300 acre Superfund. Superfund simply means one of the most polluted and most dangerous to people sites. So it's not only that it's contaminated with radiological contaminants, with carcinogens, but its closeness to the area, to such a highly populated area, makes it a Superfund site, very dangerous. In the past, it's probably not even known that blue babies with heart defects were born in Broomfield, and that was caused by the tritium from Rocky Flats. It ended up with Broomfield getting a new water supply. There was also dangers to other cities around Rocky Flats from the water in Stanley Lake, so that the connection between the creek that contaminated Stanley Lake has been cut, and for many $1 million, and other, the Woman Creek Reservoir was created, which is between Stanley Lake and Rocky Flats. Again, a very dangerous situation. So we still have this 1,300 acre Superfund site, which contains, among other things, an enormous landfill. This was a ravine that is 20 acres inside, 40 feet deep, 4 stories deep, and it has been used since the very beginning of Rocky Flats. Nobody knows what's in it. It's a contaminated site on the south end of the Superfund site, which is in the center of the entire site. It contaminates the creek, Woman Creek, that's below it, and that's in the refuge. This is one of the things that should have been cleaned up, or at least covered up in such a way that it would not be able to contaminate the surroundings. But DOE decided to just throw 2 feet of dirt on the whole site. So now the landfill, this original landfill, it's called, is sliding into the creek below it, and DOE is trying to repair it. But if it had been closed with all the 7 layers that the environmental laws require, this would not have happened. This is actually an area that has been regulated and looked at by some of DOE's own scientists, who said that what you're doing there is unacceptable. Many of the plutonium processing buildings remain on site, because many of the buildings have been underground. They've been sort of dug into the area and left there. The prairie dogs, which get down to 16 feet, dig up the contamination. The site is very badly contaminated. Some of the carcinogenic toxins are beryllium, uranium, plutonium, and many of the chlorinated hydrocarbon solvents, best known, of course, carbon-10. I have passed out a flyer that I hope many of you are able to get by Dr. Michael Ketterer, who until recently was the head of the Metro State Chemistry Department, and who's a plutonium expert, who knows more about plutonium in the soil than most of us here do, and who described the dangers of the site. The DOE generally says that a fish and wildlife refuge, Fish and Wildlife says the fish and wildlife refuges are such that they have to be open to the public, in other words, recreation for children and so on. But there are other fish and wildlife refuges that are close to the public, such as the White Sands Missile Refuge and others. Boulder County, we talked to the Boulder County School District, and they have decided not to sponsor trips to the former nuclear weapons plant, Rocky Flats, and the St. Rain District, which takes in Longmont, has also decided against it. So we would like to ask your help in trying to keep this place close to the public, close to children for recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much. You mentioned the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds that we use for cleaning equipment or whatever out there. And I remember that John Lipsky said that he tracked some hundreds of millions of gallons of the VOCs that had been injected into the soil. Am I right in my remembrance?
I don't remember that being that much.
So certainly millions of gallons, you quoted.
But one of the things that I had never heard of in my life before were spray fields and what that meant. And Ted would probably be able to talk more about where these spray fields is. But simply these carcinogenic compounds were sprayed on both the east side of the refuge, in the refuge. I mean, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And just an obvious point that shouldn't escape all of us, because so many people in senior positions tell me this, politicians as well, the refuge site has never been remediated. There's no cover of clean dirt over it. It's been left just as it was when the plutonium particles were hitting the ground, still there. So Dr. David Snow is a hydrogeologist, and by the way, David and Gale and I were part of a group in the 1980s. Half a dozen Boulder scientists that got together then and come back together in recent years, worrying about this site and opposing the federal officials. But, David, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is David Snow. I've made a career as a hydrologist, first teaching at the Colorado School of Mines. It was there that I was first introduced to some of the problems at Rocky Flats, but only in a very tangential fashion. I never got to do any in-depth studies there, although some of my students did. We are now at a time of very hotly contended issues in this country, and I'm sure every one of you has their list of pet peeves of what's going on in the government. And I want to reinforce the notion that on almost every issue that has financial interest in some agency or some persons are issues on which you should be highly suspect of their conclusions and recommendations. As a very young person, I realized I wasn't smart enough to be a liar. I better be an honest man. And unfortunately, that does not seem to be the prevailing morality in government at all levels. I found, to my dismay, during my career, that if I spoke up along lines that were at odds with my sponsor, with my client, with the government agency that was paying for my work, I would very quickly find myself shunted aside and relegated to less harmful positions. And when it came to, after working for quite a few years on the Hanford reactor site for its potential as a waste disposal site, also Lyons, Kansas, Deaf Smith, Texas, and particularly Yucca Mountain, Nevada. I spent several years working with the USGS on Yucca Mountain. But then my most recent activity was in relationship to the waste isolation pilot plant in New Mexico. And upon first looking at it, I said, this will never stand. You can't do it. It's on the fringe of a very active karst region. A karst is a place where solution-prone rocks are being dissolved by flowing groundwater. You all know Carlsbad Caverns, that's only a few miles away. And very close to the WIP repository was a huge sinkhole measuring about 1,000 acres, which has its presence due to the dissolution of the very salt deposits in which the nuclear waste was to be incarcerated. The whole nation relied upon WIP for a place to put all its unwanted waste from Rocky Flats, from Arco, Idaho, from the Savannah River plant, from Pantex, Texas, where they assembled the triggers, from I think 11 different contributor sites. So there was a very great need for a place to safely put the nuclear waste. And you spoke of Governor Romer. He was instrumental in Rocky Flats waste being transported to the WIP facility, and they were very eager to get that facility open so they would have a place to put it to clean up all these dirty Cold War era weapons related facilities across the country. So that need was satisfied by opening the repository in a place where it's ultimately going to be breached when we have climate change that restores a high water table and reinvigorates springs and lakes in the vicinity that existed back in the times of the Pleistocene glaciation. So from a geological point of view, it's a failure. Even though it's the only licensed facility in the world, it should never have been there. And I advocated for them developing a monitored retrievable storage facility while they continued to hunt for a suitable, permanent place of rest for these nuclear poisons. So here we are dealing with Rocky Flats as one of the outcomes of this Cold War era. And I have to tell you that it's been my experience to distrust the word of scientists at all levels, including the hallowed National Academy of Sciences. Anyone who has a vested interest in the outcome is practically incapable of shooting themselves in the foot, because even good people are loath to deprive their family of the means of paying their mortgage and putting their children through college. And it's a very rare individual who's willing to make the sacrifice for the sake of truth. Truth is a very rare commodity, unfortunately, and each and every one of us has to be fully aware that we have to be very circumspect in how we judge the facts, and to keep a very keen eye as to who is promoting conclusions and what is their vested interest in it. In the case of the refuge, its safety is probably going to be reevaluated. There are funds available in this package of money from the Department of Energy to institute a new study. And if all is done as has been done in the past, it will be another whitewash, and they'll come up with an answer that says all is hunky-dory and it's safe for people to reoccupy trails and a visitor center on the refuge grounds. The problem is extremely complicated, and I don't think it's ever been done adequately. Relevant factors that should be considered include the plutonium distribution aerially and by sizes and chemistry, both initially, currently, and for future conditions. Second, we need knowledge of the processes that mobilize plutonium, including predictable catastrophic events, such as high wind, water, erosion, and deposition that can influence how the how the plutonium that was distributed by airfall is either kept in a harmless, encapsulated, sequestered condition or is redistributed to the environment. We need to know more about human exposure, and predictions need to be made according to the duration and proximity of each and every recipient. We need to know more about the effects of human ingestion and imbibition, defining, for instance, the biologic half-life for each organ. It's not fair to say that all plutonium is going to reside forever in your body. The body tends to regenerate and redistribute in your human waste many of its constituents. So there have been estimates of how long plutonium will stay in the liver, the kidneys, the brain, and the bones. It may be very long periods of time for alpha particle emissions to continue. And by that same token, alpha particle emissions that you may reckon by the number of picocuries per gram relates very poorly to the number of picocuries per gram for a gamma emitter. Most of the definitions have been made on the basis of gamma emitters, whereas the health physicist Dr. Ed Martell said that the effect of one disintegration that emits an alpha particle, such as plutonium does, may have 1,000,000 times the damage to cell tissue than does one picocurie of a gamma emitter. So we need a new basis for risk assessment that's quite different than what's been done before. And we have to take with a grain of salt the risk assessments that have been promulgated and relied upon by all government agencies in this vicinity who've drunk the Kool-Aid from the Department of Energy, from the EPA, and from the Colorado Department of Health. It makes sense for us to always err on the side of safety when there is uncertainty.
Next, Mr. Ted Ziegler, who worked in the workshop, and has seen firsthand the contamination problems, I think, and the health problems related to that. Okay, so Ted, very good.
I'd like to thank everybody for attending the meeting. And what I can elaborate on is other health and safety issues. What I can elaborate on is other health and safety issues that exist on the plant site. My colleagues here are very well informing you on the plutonium issues, which is the most toxic and hazardous material that exists on the plant site. I was hired in 1982 with Rockwell International there were 4 major contractors. Started with Dow Chemical, Rockwell International, EG&G, and Kaiser Hill. I worked with all, all 3, starting with Rockwell International. And during my 13 years of employment as a safety rep and union steward, the conduct of operations at the plant site didn't change from one contractor to the other on safety issues. Safety issues that were addressed were long range in final decisions of resolving it. It took months, 6 months to a year to resolve some safety issues out at the plant site. And what I have here, if anybody would like a copy, I'll leave it up on the desk up there, but I have a map that shows you all of the well-known trenches, spray fields, and burial sites on the plant site. Shows you the building on the Superfund site, all the buildings on it. A good reference to exposures on the plant site is a company that put out several booklets. One was a final draft, and that was ChemRisk, and it's a estimated releases that were on the plant site. It describes all of the chemicals, the plutonium, the building locations, and there are other burial sites that are of history here. I recently had provided copies of a 36-page, excuse me, I have COPD from the plant site, so I have produced that to several people here, given it to them, that 1,400 barrels were buried on both sides of the fence on the east side of the plant site. It's a good example. Now, this hasn't been disproved that it still exists there. My time on the plant site in the 13 years and follow-ups since 1982, I know of no materials that were removed that were buried, imploded on the plant site. 30-foot deep trenches, everything but the kitchen sink went into those trenches layer upon layer. And it's what my colleagues here have discussed with you this evening is not hearsay. We have documentation to prove what we say. I don't talk about anything that I don't have documentation on, neither do my colleagues. And it's the same arena that we that we look at today exists with Colorado Department of Health, EPA, legacy management. They are reluctant to take soil sampling. That's where the contamination is. It's not on those dried up wells that they're saying that it's a quality sample that they're taking. And there is so much contamination sprayed since 1952, buried, sprayed on the plant site continuously. Leach ponds, and it's just something that will never leave the plant site. There's no removal of it, no quality removal of that soil. It's penetrated to 4 stories under, for example, imploded, plutonium contaminated. There was in the ChemRisk report, there was a estimated 1 million pounds of lead used for radiation shielding on the plant site. That, for the most part, is imploded. It's all contaminated. And lead paint to stop radiation from leaking out and contaminating the employees. I have many employees that have passed away with cancers, other diseases, and we have approximately an estimate throughout the last 10 years of 35 employees passing away at the plant site. And that's every quarter. And we're going to be extinct pretty soon. We want to educate the public and protect the future generations. We have nothing to gain other than try to protect future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Oh. Hello? This is not working. I don't understand this. It's working.
Thank you, Ted. And state the obvious in a way. There is a wealth of cryptic, secret information in the remaining workers. And they've been either sworn to secrecy, or I've heard that they fear that the US government would damage their pensions. And so that somehow needs some method by which we can learn what is buried secretly out there before it does further harm. Just make a very quick comment about the matter that was brought up about the what I call the quick and dirty cleanup, all in quotes, of the central part of the donut, as I call it. And there is a comparison about what should have been spent and how long it would take, which pretty well agrees with what the original Department of Energy forecast was that Dr. Biggs mentioned. And that came as a result of a report that I heard on the BBC last year that the UK government has an almost identical site called Sellafield up in northern England. And it's going to take them, they've dedicated $1 billion a year for the next 104 years to clean up that site, something like background. That's the sort of range of money and the sort of range of time that should have been expended on Rocky Flats. So finally, to give us the perspective from an archival historical viewpoint, Dr. LeRoy Moore has been working on the site since the 1970s. So
79.
Yeah, right.
Hello, I'm glad to see all of you here tonight. I sent papers around, and if you happen to be with somebody else, it might be a good idea to share it, because I don't think I have enough copies for everybody. The crowd is somewhat bigger than I had expected. I think I made 50 copies. Anyway, I want to talk about these pictures that I'm giving you, and some of this will repeat things that have already been said. But look at the first picture on the upper left. And that's a picture of the quantity of plutonium that was released from the plant from 1953, when operations began, until 1977. This is essentially the period when Dow Chemical was the manager of the site. And if you look, the biggest release of plutonium was the 903 pad, and that means that there were several thousand drums of plutonium-contaminated waste that were stored outdoors for more than a decade, and those drums leaked. They rusted and they leaked plutonium into the soil, and it was the largest single release on the Rocky Flat site. And then it also shows in that same figure, it shows a big fire that happened in 1957. And the fire in 1957 totally destroyed a huge bank of filters, about 30 feet long and 8 feet high. Each filter was 2 feet thick, and that was supposed to protect the public. That was intended to catch the particles of plutonium that were leaving the plant. But in the fire, the filters were totally destroyed, and all the plutonium went right up the chimney, and then the wind scattered it all the way across Denver to the far side of Denver, the suburbs in between. So if you look further on this, you'll see that there was a fire in 1969. That fire happened on Mother's Day, Sunday, Mother's Day, 1969. And Ed Martell, who has already been mentioned tonight, a scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, he had experience with plutonium and with nuclear weapons. When he was in the Army after World War II, he participated in some of the activities of exploding the bombs in the South Pacific. And he asked the authorities at Rocky Flats to collect samples in the off-site soil because he thought there was probably releases of plutonium. And if there were, the public should know about it and they should know about it. And they turned him down. And because he knew what he was doing, he got a colleague and they went out there and they found plutonium up to 400 times the deposits from global fallout in the environment off the Rocky Flat site. The Atomic Energy Commission sent 2 scientists to Colorado to either refute or verify what Martell had found, and their names were Cray and Hardy, and they made the map that's the map, on the middle side there on the left-hand side, and that shows where the plutonium close to the site had blown. And you can see the dark areas are the more contaminated part of the site, and the areas off the site equal about 30 square miles. And actually, that's actually the area that was declared the class area in the lawsuit that got mentioned here earlier tonight. So the people living in that area, the jury declared after the trial that they had plutonium in their property that was released by the contractors at Rocky Flats, and that plutonium could be expected to be there essentially forever. That's the reality for the people living off the site inside the class area. I wanted you to see the third picture, which is a speck of plutonium in the lung tissue of an ape, and the photograph is magnified 500 times. A particle of plutonium is too small to see, but not too small to do harm. And what you see here is what happened over a period of 48 hours inside the lung tissue of an ape. And that star in the middle is a speck of plutonium, and it is giving off radiation in that 48-hour period of time. And what typically happens with plutonium, if you take a particle into your body, it lodges somewhere, and it is likely to lodge in the lung, or the liver, or bone, or brain or the gonads, and wherever it lodges, it will continue to irradiate the surrounding cells, probably for the rest of your life. And so you may, 20 or 30 years later, you may get cancer. You don't have any idea where it came from. So I used to tell my students when I was teaching, the best thing to do if you go to Rocky Flats is don't breathe. Just don't breathe. Don't inhale particles of plutonium. The image up on the upper right comes from physicist Fritjof Capra, who teaches at the University of California in Berkeley, and he made a very amazing diagram showing how long plutonium should be separated. Plutonium-239 should be separated from the environment. And if you look at that figure, you see that the period of human existence is very, very brief by comparison to the long half-life of plutonium-239 that will continue to irradiate future generations if it's in the environment. The next picture, it's a picture of me, and it was taken on a June day in 2010 when my friend Bob Deltretti, the photographer, was here, and we decided one day that we would go out to Rocky Flats. So we drove out there, and it just happened to be that it was the very day that they were breaking ground to build the Candelas residential development, which stretches across the whole southern edge of the Rocky Flats site. And this is right at the corner where the Rocky Flats site and Candelas meet. And as you can see, that day the wind was blowing. And I'm glad I wasn't a 6-year-old child. I'm glad I was an 80-year-old man because I could take the plutonium into the body and I would be dead and gone before I get cancer. And I'm not going to have any offspring at that age, so I'm not harming future generations. Those are the things that can happen with plutonium contamination. The next picture shows you the Rocky Flats site, and in the center of it is the land that's still held by the Department of Energy, and it's a Superfund site, as you can recognize. And so Harvey's waving at me, but I want you to look on the other side of that handout. One of the things that they say that when they did the cleanup is that plutonium will not move in the environment. But there are creatures out there, 18 kinds of burrowing animals that dig down up to 16 feet below the surface. And whatever is down there, they're going to bring it to the surface. And they're likely to be a spider. There's a picture of a spider. There's a picture of a mole. Those creatures will bring plutonium up, and the wind will blow it away like it was in that picture that I showed you. So it's better.
You've been very patient. Now it's your time to ask lots of questions. And if we can manage this, going to, yes.
I have a question. Will this appear on the internet and maybe YouTube? I have a question, yeah. Will this appear on the internet, maybe YouTube?
It's being live streamed on Rocky Flats Right to Know Facebook page, live stream right now. And then we'll be able to access it.
Yeah.
We'll put it up on your site.
Okay, we'll be on Rocky Flats Right to Know Facebook page and also the website. Thank you.
Thank you. So, let's see if we can have some questions. Okay.
I've heard rumors throughout the years that many of the barrels, perhaps, in plutonium were buried in Stanley Lake. Is there any truth to that?
I've not personally not heard that, but John has probably got the deepest expertise. Have you heard it?
Are you saying the actual barrels?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
But of course, there's plutonium in Stanley Lake. I'm afraid I'm at the risk of talking too much, but years ago the health department said, yes, that was the case, but it's safely under a foot or more of sediment. And that was according to a Dr. Cohen at School of Mines. So I called him up and said, I'm Professor this and you're Professor that. And I've written papers for another purpose on sedimentation, and I just discussed 5 different cases where you could get reworking of that material into the water column, and he agreed with every one of them. And this is what we find over and over again. It's a sort of almost boring theme, but I don't know where they find these people from. Another question?
Thank you. Has anyone compiled a list of all the studies showing contamination off the site, or in the buffer zone, or off the site completely?
As a compilation, I'm not sure. What do you think, LeRoy or John? I'm guessing there's so much with the internet. It's so easy to get hold of these studies now. They go back many decades, but they're still available. Not as a compilation as such. But okay, just to complete, there is an archive in the CU in the Northern Library that has massive materials. I mean, goodness knows how many tons. So, John.
Essentially, the Rocky Flats site was divided into 16 operable units. So if you see peripheral operable unit, POU, that's the refuge. And part of Candelas, going to Indiana and going north from there up towards Colorado 120 is OU3. And that was also not remediated. That is part of the class action that settled for $375 million last year. And the OU, or Central Operable Unit, is the Superfund site that continues right now. And then the other 13 were within the refuge and the active Superfund site. So it was cataloged in that manner. It was operable units, individual hazardous substance sites, or IHISs. And a good one is IHIS 165, which is the triangle area. And that was the repository for the 69 fire. All of the debris, contaminated debris, was shoved out over. And what's so important about that is that it was on the ledge, the northeast corner of the perimeter security zone, and it went down into North Walnut Creek. So the question about the barrels of plutonium, they weren't barrels. Rocky Flats had a way of contaminating Stanley Lake and Great Western Reservoir.
John, Dr. Ketterer's map, which some of you have here, proved that the research he's done, off-site soils near Rocky Flats contain some of the highest contents of plutonium found anywhere within the continental U.S. This contamination has been proven to originate from Rocky Flats. And this is that map. I've got some more copies if anybody wants to see. Dr. Michael Ketterer, head of the chemistry department at Metro State University in Denver.
I made the mistake of buying a home about a mile or so from Stanley Lake. I'm within the cohort of beneficiaries from the Rocky Flats settlement. But of course, we're suffering the after effects of having ingested plutonium. I'm not dead yet, but I still have a few years to prove that plutonium can be fatal. As I've said before, you can autopsy me soon. My fear about Stanley Lake is not what is in the buried soils of the lake, but what may be redistributed when Stanley Lake has a very low level. After it's been exhausted for its irrigation potential, it often stands for many months during the winter at a very low stage with a huge beach exposed all around the periphery. Probably 1,000 acres of exposed beach open to the wind. So when you have a 90-mile-an-hour Chinook come by, up it comes. Those are times when perhaps we who live close by should get in our cars and get the hell out of there. The same is true of any time I see smoke coming off Rocky Flats. If nature deals us a wildfire, which it's bound to do eventually, that's another good time to evacuate, because it will be a time of lots of resuspension of what's on the surface.
Another question? Incidentally, please feel free to ask really blunt questions of us, okay? Or just to say, well, I didn't quite get the point, or just go over something again, because this is complex material.
My question has to do with the alpha radiation from the water being transported into water supplies in the Westminster, Portland, Northwood area.
I have kind of a similar question about Wellington Reservoir. Why was that built, and is it contaminated? And the water, I understand, is going into Fairmont and Wheat Ridge. They're drinking water. If anyone knows about that.
Could we also include a comment about the potential breaching of those dams that's sort of coming up pretty soon? So who can take that? John?
I'm not aware of the Wellington Reservoir, but in the late 90s, after Rocky Flats was closed in '89, it was determined that Great Western Reservoir was polluted, and Broomfield sought another water source. So the DOE paid Broomfield $100 million to seek out a new water source. Right now, Broomfield is very concerned about what comes off Rocky Flats at Walnut Creek, even though there's a diversion. But I understand, and I hate to pass a rumor, but I trust the person who told me this, is that they are using effluent from Rocky Flats in Walnut Creek for irrigating the golf courses and landscapes in the city and the county. And Woman Creek no longer goes to Stanley Lake. It's diverted with the Woman Creek Reservoir Authority. And that water goes north all the way around Metro Denver to the South Platte. So we're sending it out to our friends out on the northeastern plains. Now, what we do have a concern with are the terminal pond breach. So there's 3 dams that still exist at Rocky Flats: A4, B5, and C2. So A4 is on North Walnut Creek, B5 is on South Walnut Creek, and C2 is on Woman Creek. And what Dr. Snow was saying earlier is what I'm gravely concerned about, is that these creeks do not flow all the time and they dry up. So we have these dams that are going to be breached as early as next year. And there are a couple, go ahead.
Why are they going to be breached?
Well, actually, they were going to be breached in 2011.
They plan to breach them?
And they're going to breach them because the DOE is tired of paying for the maintenance of these dams, and literally there's a zillion things to talk about here, and we don't have the time for it. But Broomfield was adamant about not breaching the dams. And I have letters from Broomfield to DOE complaining about it. And so DOE listened to Broomfield, and because they're a municipality, DOE delayed the breach, which shouldn't surprise anybody. But I do have the letters. And Woman Creek Reservoir Authority, which is a quasi-political entity out of Westminster, is also adamant against C2 being breached as well. There's a lot of shenanigans going on out there. The creeks used to be catch and release. DOE changed it to a flow through, so they dry up, and then when the precip occurs, then they fill up and they move along. To give you an idea, the liquid in those creeks were allowed to flow out, and it was like over 20 million gallons total. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen next year or in 2019, but there is another problem that we have on the horizon, and Woman Creek Reservoir Authority meets every 2 months on the second Monday of the month. I'm one of the few public participants at those meetings, and they have a really good hydrologist by the name of Christine Hawley, who has written a fantastic report about all of this, and it goes into great detail. It's so easy to read, I can even read it. And I just wanted to finish one other thing. Next month, DOE is going to announce their fourth five-year review. It's a Superfund site, so every 5 years there's a review. And there were 4 entities that contributed to that. That's how much public involvement there is. But you can look at those write-ups at the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council website. And it's going to be it's too late for all of us to make a lot of noise about right now. But stay tuned, because next month we're going to hear probably the same old tune. You know, safe for all purposes, it's protective, and there's no problems out there.
Other question?
I'm going to close the meeting, but everyone is welcome to stay and ask questions as long as you wish. I just want to be respectful of your time. So I'm Bonnie Graham Reed. I have the website. I'd like Marion, who's the inspiration, to come forward to or stand up there. So this is our 1-year anniversary of our work. Marion inspired me to start having these monthly meetings. At the first meeting I said, how do you find out the truth? But I think a good way is to follow the money. All of these people volunteered to come here tonight. Everything Marion and I do is volunteer. And somebody volunteered, well, the artist is here of our t-shirts. This logo says it all. The buildings were simply buried. And remember, that was where the industrial site was, the central operable unit. Where the refuge was, there was no remediation. So please spread the word, learn about it, come to the Stewardship Council meetings. I hope everybody got the yellow paper of upcoming events. If not, there's more on the back table back there. But to celebrate, so everybody take a deep breath, because this is our 1-year anniversary of having these meetings. And we've been so blessed to have wonderful speakers. Wes McKinley came last October. He's also going to come the end of September. And last month, John Lipsky spoke. So we're just so blessed. So under a couple chairs, well, under 3 chairs, if you look, there's a little yellow Post-it note, and 2 of them will say free bumper sticker, and 1 of them will say a free t-shirt. But don't despair. If you would like a bumper sticker or a t-shirt, we're just asking for a donation. So we have a whole box of our t-shirts. They're good conversation. And here's the artist right here, back here, Jeff Geik. He's also the creator of the Cold War horse. Please give Jeff a round of applause. So I invite you all to stay. I'll pass the microphone, but also I want to be respectful of your time, so you're welcome to leave. Here's back to Harvey. Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah.
If the Department of Wildlife took over the Rocky Flats, why aren't they worried about the wildlife that's out there on the contaminated area? Aren't they supposed to be protecting them also? I mean, if they don't care about people, maybe they care about wildlife.
They don't care about humans, let alone wildlife.
Harvey.
Well,
Harvey.
Yeah. Okay. It's basically, well, first detail, a bit of data is that some years ago, maybe some of you remember this, I believe there were 29 deer that were, I think, cold, supplied by saying, and they all have plutonium in their tissues. And that was reported in newspapers, and the immediate response from the officials was, look, don't worry about this, if you're a hunter, just don't eat the organ meats, just eat the rest of the venison. That gives me a sort of hint as to how casual, how prepared they are to sort of obscure the issue. Yes, I do think there's concern, except if they admitted that the animals were really suffering, and there have been plenty of animal surveys out there, but they never went down to the base of the food chain, to the small creatures and the insects that are in direct contact, of course, with the soil all the time. Those are not studied. And so there are lots of questions. We keep on saying this is a very complex site. It's not only the technology that's complex, it's the plant and animal life and the actual geomorphology and the geology, which we barely touched on. So it's an immensely complex and moving site. If you could take a snapshot of 100 years over the 24,000 years of the half-life of the stuff we're talking about, you see extraordinary changes out there with things slumping and moving and new areas being exposed. So thanks for your question. That's as far as we can go. Okay.
I have a question because of all the fires and all the stuff that went on that blew over Denver. You know, I grew up kind of by Indian Tree Golf Course, and to me that's too close. And even now I live off of 64th and Ward, and so I'm wondering, even now, what is the danger now? Because still the smallest particle of plutonium and all that, you know, is so dangerous. So what risk is there now if we're not right on the site, but we're still in surrounding areas?
I think it's fair to say that the officials have not allowed us to do the sort of full-scale study, not just us, but lots of other people. We have a wealth of environmental science people in the whole front range. But we've learned repeatedly that you get funding if you tell the right sort of story, but if you find the wrong thing, and this happens even with their own employees, you're dumped. And there's some extraordinary stories about an Israeli soil scientist, for instance, that's still fuming about how he was treated. It's, again, the complexity and the amount of money that the many, it's not just billions, but I suspect it was trillions that was spent on producing 70,000 A-bombs that are the triggers for the H-bomb that were made out there. If some tiny fraction of that money had been spent on a proper study afterwards, but that's not the way government ever works. We don't know, no. And I mean, I sometimes, when I drive past there, not often, I also close my windows and so forth, but who knows? It's like going into the mountains where it's looking threatening and maybe there's a lightning strike in a distant peak. Do you continue up, or do you, if your hair stands up, you still continue up to the top? It's so hard for people to judge, and all we're saying is what Ed Martell, deceased, was a veteran of the Bikini Atoll bombs in the Second World War. said do stay away from the place if you can, as far away as possible.
Second question, in these housing developments, Candela and Leiden and Five Parks and all of these areas that they're just building like crazy, and I know it disturbs the soil, but are these young families that are moving in that don't know the history of Rocky Flats and haven't lived in the area and they just move in blindly? Now, I heard that they have to sign a waiver when they close it. I don't know if that's true or not, but are they being informed of anything about Rocky Flats or just moving in hordes?
I need some, yeah.
So if you go to Candela's website, we have a copy of what they signed. And what they signed is that they're moving in next to a wildlife refuge. And they have science on the Candela's website. They have studies that they did testing of the soil. They tested for gamma radiation, which is radon. Plutonium is an alpha emitter. You can't find it. So what they are saying is safe, and they are standing on a shaky science. And you wouldn't know that. You're doing your due diligence. You are out there searching. You've heard about things. You're looking it up, and you go to their website that looks very official, where they have statements on it that say things like, most successful cleanup in EPA history. That's what they're telling these homeowners. When you drive through the developments, their license plates are out of state. They're preying on the people that are coming in from California and Texas and Wyoming or Wisconsin, yeah. And they don't know. And then they're out all that money. And then they're trapped. What would it be? What would it take to really actually have a government program that says, whoops, we're going to buy you all out, and we're going to ensure that you guys stay healthy, and your families stay healthy, and your children stay healthy, and we're going to close this down. That's what we'd like to see, and that's what my group Candela's Close works for. So, next question, sorry.
I was holding my breath around that.
Knowing that there are 3 large fracking operations just south of Rocky Flats and more are being drilled every day, what additional risk does that pose to us? I mean, outside of the polluting of our groundwater, but the evaporative process that they use to get rid of the chemicals that are in excess when they go to break up the shale. What additional risks are we exposed to in our air through the evaporative process of fracking from their waste pools?
I'll give it over to David Snow, the hydrogeologist, but I would say so many of these questions should be posed to the State Health Department. But as I said before, they have drunk the Kool-Aid that the DOE is offering. And even though we've talked to them, we've gone down several times to talk to them in detail, I don't think they're receptive. So,
hydrofracking has been a very actively discussed issue in the state, and it's really quite a distinctly different than this plutonium contamination issue. What's obviously a concern of yours and a concern of many people. For eastern Colorado, the level at which hydrofracking is being done is well over a mile beneath the surface, separated from the surficial aquifers of very shallow depth by over a mile of shale. I don't consider it a grave concern for the actual hydrofracking that goes on in the eastern Colorado area. I cannot say the same for similar activities in other parts of the state. For instance, if you're hydrofracking the Manco Shale right alongside the Colorado River out near Rifle, I think a different set of safety criteria should be used. You also raised the issue of the disposal of the flowback fluids that contain the suite of chemicals used to create the hydrofracking in the first place. And these are being disposed of in some 32 and probably more disposal wells in eastern Colorado. And most of these disposal wells are into horizons deep in the basin that are not have waters above 10,000 parts per million, deemed to be of no value to any potential user. So to contaminate those waters is not a great concern. What has happened, however, is that one of those wells up near Greeley has triggered a swarm of earthquakes. And the Denver area is kind of famous in geologic history for being the first place that man-made earthquakes were identified in the disposal of chemical waste on the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. So there was an arsenal well that drilled 12,000 feet deep into the crystalline basement rock that actually triggered a swarm of about 3,000 earthquakes, magnitude 5.5 and down. So it does have a potential. And in Oklahoma, you're hearing a great deal of talk about similar activity going on, and they do have a disposal problem in that area. I don't think that disposal is something that one needs to worry about a great deal in eastern Colorado. I hope that I could make you more comfortable on that score. But the plutonium distribution has not been adequately studied. And what I was trying to point out earlier was that it's very difficult to know who to trust. Scientists of all persuasions and qualifications, you have to ask the question, what motivates them in the first place? Because they may enter into a study with a preconceived notion that they're working for their client, and if they want to continue working for their client, they better meet the client's needs, which is to whitewash the situation so that the agency continues as it is doing. Fish and Wildlife, they're in the business of creating a wonderful recreational refuge around the Rocky Flats facility. And you can sympathize with those who feel that it's a terrible waste of wonderful land that if they're prevented from riding their bicycles and riding their horses through this contaminated ground. To my point of view, this audience should be charged with the duty to make sure that the next administration of a different persuasion than we have today might possibly declare the Rocky Flats facility to be a national sacrificial zone never to be trespassed on again. That would be the only way to keep it sacrosanct.
There's a special status for Rocky Flats that the Department of Energy has said that this is the template, the benchmark for all the other DOE sites around the country that will eventually be decommissioned and turned into wildlife refuges with these minimal cleanup situations we're trying to describe. So what happens here is going to have repercussions all the way through the country at nearly 20 DOE sites, and that people all over the country will eventually be exposed to recreation at all these areas. And this is where you begin to think, given the multitude of generations that are in 24,000 years of half-life, I believe that's 1,000 generations. If there is a possibility, as has been hinted at in medical studies, only hinted at, that there may be a transmission of plutonium cellular damage from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, this becomes a much, much bigger problem. And this may be why they're fighting so hard to keep the evidence from us, and particularly from our politicians. Is there perhaps one last question? Yeah.
very briefly, plutonium aside, have there been any off-site independent studies regarding the volatile organic compounds and inorganic compounds as well? I understand there are some 8,000 different types of chemicals and solvents used on site to the tune of tons. And what would it take to get more independent studies off-site, specifically at Westminster Hills Dog Park and Stanley Lake, both of the water and the surface oil?
Studies of the VOCs and other agents that have been pumped into the soil or sprayed over the soil. Are there any studies that we know of that have been done downstream, as you might say?
Yeah, I've done a huge study on the waste stream report when I did the investigation at Rocky Flats from 87 to 88. And I'm talking about a 39-volume set, about 5 or 6 inches wide. It's called the Waste Stream Identification Characterization Report. And there were thousands of VOCs and other types of chemicals that were used at Rocky Flats. And of course, DOE purged all of those reports so they're not available to the public since 2008 when the reading room at the Front Range Community College was housing the reading room for Rocky Flats. So it's kind of hard to give you examples in that regard. But there are the chem risk reports from 1992, part 1 through 5 or 6. And they outline burial sites and the chemicals. And the one thing that probably I can answer your question, but of the 7,000 to 10,000 chemicals used at Rocky Flats, 5 were monitored for the workers. 5. So, there's catalogs of it, but there's not a lot of information at all.
What would it take to get a new independent study on site, like at the dog park and Stanley Lake?
I would say, and this came up earlier, and I was thinking about it, is that we have the best health department money can buy. We really do. It's a user fee based health department. And I think that's where the pressure ought to be placed. Because there's quite a story about the health department trying to get money from DOE because Hanford got it, so they wanted money. And after the raid, about 2 weeks later, they did get the money. And it's on the Rocky Flats Ambush Grand Jury website. And it's actually the video of Romer announcing the agreement in principle. And that's where I think the pressure needs to be placed. In 2015, DOE paid the health department almost $300,000 for Carl Sprang and his benefits and travel and what have you. So it looks like it's around $300,000 a year that DOE pays the health department. Not unusual. It's just that we don't get an independent verification because they bought off Carl Sprang. He's their guy because they vetted them and they're not going to listen to anybody else. And I think the pressure has to go there. Our group, members of our group went and visited Martha Rudolph. She's the environmental director, number 2 under Wolk, and Gary Bowman. And we got a lot of nods and smiles. We'll get back to you. And that was a year ago, and she hasn't gotten back to us. But I guess we were easily dismissed, she thought. And the lawsuit came through in May. So I think they don't think we're easily dismissed anymore. But all of you people here have a voice. And Carl Sprang is a very nice man, and he'll answer your emails. And I suggest that you inundate him with your questions, because he will answer them.
There is some work done by legacy management, which is DOE at the site at this point. And I'm not really that familiar with it, but they have methods of blowing the chlorinated type solvents out of the water. So they are making an effort that I don't think it's very useful. I don't think it's very well done. But that's something that DOE is aware of and is working on. There's a method of doing that, so I don't know if you want to.
I forgot about that. If you look at the DOE Legacy Management Rocky Flats site, website, and you'll see what kind of operations that they're using. They're using what's called wattles. I don't know, some kind of organic material, and they're using air strippers because it's a Superfund site. They don't need an air permit, but they're allowed to blow off the VOCs and what have you into the air. There's no measurement of it. Yes, they're doing it. And so one of the questions I asked of the 5-year review is that they have a RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act permit, and they haven't disposed of anything since 2005. So what do they do with all these hazardous substances on these wattles and organic material, bamboo and what have you? And how are they getting rid of it because they're hazardous waste? But it's going to take a community to go after this stuff. And it's just so much. Don't be inundated with their science. Just look at their procedural things and look for the violations.
Well, I think simply they are not following what's called RCRA, right? The Resources Recovery and Conservation Act way, which is the law to clean up sites like this. And blowing carbon tap and other stuff in the air is not generally an acceptable method of doing it, but that's what they do. They have several sites where they get rid of it, in the creeks, Walnut Creek and Woman Creek.
In some of the highest ozone counts in the state, guess where? Rocky Flats.
For what it's worth, many years ago, a colleague in the chemistry department at CU was very high placed, very serious man who became a regent, said to me, "You're so concerned about plutonium." He said, "I'm more concerned about the volatile organic compounds, the VOCs." So, well, just have to leave it at that, but thank you very much for your attention. Yes, yes.
One last question. It's been 28 years since the plant closed, and we estimated the development time for cancer to be 25 to 30 years. So, where are cancer?
Well, one way of studying that is to make sure that, as the Department of Health has done, is not to look at the thyroid cancer data. Okay? Professor Carol Jensen, who is a nursing specialist, is looking into this now. And, in a sense,
Okay,
I
thank
would
you,
be utterly
Mr. Ziegler.
delighted, I think the rest of the panel would be, if it was proved that there was an innocuous exposure, that there was nothing to what we're trying to warn people about. Then we could all breathe more easily, okay? But at the moment, all the evidence seems to point to something looming potential. So all we can do is warn people to take an interest and try to get in touch with your wonderful congressional representatives and alert them. But thank you very much for your comments. It's been very enjoyable to meet with you. Thank you.